This week on Liminal Outdoors Podcast, we're going to talk about why my Colorado over-the-counter archery elk hunt way outperformed my premium limited entry Utah hunt. Let's dive into it.
It's these quiet moments, the liminal moment, literally the space between. Not fully light, not fully dark, but building something new. Like a metaphor for our life. Who are you building? Who are you becoming? What skill do you want to learn? What adventure do you want to go on? You build them in these small, incremental, liminal moments, one piece at a time, stacked on top of each other. Let's do it together. Let's build it right now at Liminal Outdoors.
In 2025, I actually had two archery elk tags. One, my normal, put in the back of my pocket just in case, very easy to get. Not technically an over-the-counter tag, but very, very easy to get. I get it almost every single year. The other, I was fortunate enough to pick up a very premium Utah limited entry, probably never going to get it in my life type elk tag. I actually got a call in July that the one random non-resident archery elk tag had been turned back in and I was next on the list. I think I had 17 points, so this would have been my 18th year. Still drew it on the random, meaning I didn't have enough points to draw the max point tag. I think the max point tag was taken 24, 25, something like that. And so, of course, I was on top of the moon, super excited about this premium Utah tag that essentially is, a once in a lifetime tag. And it was kind of a bust. My Colorado general, very basic, way outperformed. And so here's that story. Went to Utah. I spent 15 days in Utah altogether, some by myself. My middle son Jace came with me a few days. I had a good buddy Ben come with me a few days. We covered that unit top to bottom, inside and out. And I found some elk, don't get me wrong, but it just combined with the general archery deer and the unlimited spike hunters, there was people everywhere. And the places I was finding big bulls, just being real, I just didn't think I could get an elk out of there. Not that I'm afraid to hike. We backpack hunt all the time. It's just the archery elk hunt in Utah is early and was very steep. The bulls I were finding were down in deep, dark holes, several miles, including a couple thousand vertical feet to get down to them. And I just didn't think I could get them out before they spoiled. It's not that I didn't want to, and we made some plays. Don't get me wrong. As a matter of fact, I did find some elk, a few bulls, towards the end of my hunt in a little bit lower country in the oak brush, and we did get very, very close to that bull a couple of times. It's just never worked out, and it proved to be a very difficult hunt. Not that, elk hunting is almost always difficult, but I've hunted elk, coming on 30 years. I've guided, maybe 100 elk hunters and probably another 100 between myself and friends and family. I've been on a lot of elk hunts, and this one was it was just hard. Fast forward, I come home from my Utah elk hunt. I did shoot a spike on the last day, which was delicious, by the way. And it was the last weekend of the Colorado hunt. I hadn't used that tag yet. It's the one that I try to always put an elk tag in my pocket in Colorado just to have. It's good to have options, right? You can't elk hunt if you don't have a tag. And so I always put a tag in my pocket if we're able to. And getting down to the last weekend, I'd been gone a lot. I was tired. I was wore out. My middle son, in particular, had been running high school cross country. So, in the times that I was home, we'd been chasing him, and he was whooped. And again, got to that last weekend of the Colorado season, and I asked him, "Hey, we got a free day tomorrow. What do you want to do? Do you need some recovery time? Do you want to hang out? Do you want to go fishing? Do you want to go hunting? What do you want to do?" And he's like, "I want to go calling an elk." Okay, we'll give it a go. Why not? And to be fair, I didn't have real big expectations. This is again kind of a very general unit. Essentially, one day to hunt. I was just hoping to hear a couple bugles and maybe call a bull in. Honestly, anything with a 5-inch brow tine or 4 points on one side was going to be fair game. I was not going to be picky on this hunt. We had one day to make it happen, and I didn't really realize until this hunt really that he hadn't been on a lot of bugling elk, and it was just a factor of sports schedules and trying to juggle everybody's. We're applying for tags. You're trying to figure out when everybody can go and how this tag matches with this tag, and for whatever reason, Jason pretty much just rifle elk hunted. He'd killed a couple cows. He's killed some great mule deer. Killed a couple mule deer with his bow. But this was really the first day that he'd really been on a really good bugle archery elk hunt with me. And the year before, we'd gone on a day and kind of got into some elk. They bugled a little bit. We never really got close. And that just stuck with him in his mind. And he's like, I want to go do that. Now, keep in mind, this darn kid running cross country's in 10 times the shape that I am. I mean, I had just put some miles on in Utah, don't get me wrong. So I was feeling good, but I was keeping up with these 15-year-old kids is getting harder and harder every year, let me tell you. And so we got up early the next morning, left well before dark, drove up into the spot. And there's a couple different little spots we like to hunt in this particular area. Went to the first one, and there was a car and a camp actually right where we like to take off from. And so we aborted mission, backed out, ran up the canyon a few miles, went to plan B, and there wasn't anybody there. So like, sweet, jumped out, threw the headlamps on, and going into this specific spot, this first mile, first 20 minutes, it's a bear. It's steep. You got to scramble to get up on the ridge. And once you get on the ridge, it's not too terrible for a while. You're still going up, but it's not horrible. And we got through the scramble, kind of working down the ridge, and it's kind of just right at that gray light. Still a little too dark to shoot, but morning's coming. And actually, we bumped some elk in a meadow as we were working through there. And so we stopped and gave it 10 or 15 minutes, kind of caught our breath, let it get a little more light. And as we're sitting there, there's an elk whistling. Like, think about a ridge and then a couple finger canyons coming off of that ridge. And we're kind of on the edge of one of those finger canyons where it's going to meet the main ridge. And as we're looking up towards the main ridge, these elk are bugling between us and the top of the ridge. And so when we kind of get collected and catch our breath, we start chasing bugles. And when we get, maybe 15 minutes from the top of the ridge, the bugling just quit. And granted, it's still early. And Jason's like, oh no, they stopped bugling. And I said, I don't think so. I think they went off the other side. I think they're still bugling. We just can't hear them because they're just over the top. And so sure enough, we got up on top of that ridge, and as soon as we crested out, man, down in the canyon there's best I could tell, there was one kind of main herd bull with his cows, and then a couple satellites, and they're making a ruckus. And so we bailed off and we start chasing them. But we get in that typical cat and mouse game. If you've ever elk hunted before, like when they kind of decide that it's time to go to bed, a lot of times they just go. And it's really hard to call particularly a herd bull out of that herd in that moment. And that was the case here. Now, he had a couple of satellites with him, and I was actually pretty hopeful that we could pull one of those satellites out. Jace had never been with me when I had killed an elk with a bow, and being the last weekend, and again, very easy to draw, might as well be over the counter type unit. I wasn't being real picky. Colorado has a 4-point antler restriction rule in most units, which applied to this unit. So honestly, if he had a 5-inch brow tine or 4 points on the side, he was going to be big enough that day. And so we were even trying to call one of these satellites off of the herd and just get them to come in and take a peek. And boy, and they were going to bed. We're already a couple, maybe 3 miles from the truck, including that scramble up the ridge. We've bailed off in the backside in that back canyon, and we followed them all the way to the bottom. And now they're starting to go up that other side. And it was just like, at what point do you have to be like, that's enough? As a matter of fact, I've hunted in this spot before, but every other time I had been in that spot, we had actually backpacked in around the other side and camped and then hunted from camp up to that spot. So just to give you an idea of how far we're getting from the pickup at this point. So we kind of sat in that little creek bottom, and it's still morning. Those shadows are still long, the air's still cool, and those elk are still bugling. They're just getting away, and they're going up now the second ridge away from us. And so we sat and had a little snack and caught our breath, and it felt like those elk kind of paused in the timber before the ridge. And I'm like, man, it doesn't seem like they're going to bed there because it's south facing, it's pretty open aspens, but they're certainly hung up right there. And so we went like, let's go. We've gone this far, what does it hurt to go another 800 yards, 500 yards? And as we're working through those aspens, kind of the same thing happens. We darn near get to the top of the ridge and we lost all sound. And I told him, I was like, dude, the same thing. They dropped off that backside. And I said, and I know that backside is a big, deep canyon. And there's lots of dark timber. Like, they're going there to bed. They're going to bed in that dark timber. But man, when they get off the top, the country gets really big real fast. And in fact, I had taken Jason to that same canyon the year before. He had a first rifle tag. And that particular year, there was a bunch of hunters in there, and we never saw an elk. So Jace knew the country. I could tell him, that one ridge that we were on the second day. Well, that's right over the top. We're about to drop into there. I think that it kind of struck him at that point too, just how darn far we were from the truck, because we were getting pretty far. And I told him, I said, if we drop in there, we're committed, and we probably gotta go out how we backpacked in last year. Like if we go over this last ridge and we lose that elevation, now we're in a whole different ball game. And we kind of had a little come to Jesus meeting on the top of that ridge, and we both decided, what the heck? What do we got to lose? The elk are bugling. It's the last weekend. We don't have anywhere to be. Let's go. And so we bailed off. And we got into that dark timber on the backside, and now picture you've got a really long canyon, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 mile long canyon, and there's just lots of finger ridges and canyons coming off, both sides of that canyon, and we're in those finger ridges on the side of that canyon, a big canyon, like you couldn't shoot a rifle across it, so big. And we're just like hunting those finger ridges, and it's all dark timber. It's all north facing, right where they love to bed. And man, we got into that dark timber, and there was just elk whistling. There was several bulls firing off. We found it, and it's hard to explain to people who haven't elk hunted before, but especially when you're hunting these kind of over the counter or low draw type deals, you hunt all season for this day. Like, the elk don't bugle all the time. And this was the day, that a lot of times what you don't see on the TV shows and in the cameras and stuff is a lot of times you'll go days without seeing or hearing an elk in some of these places, and you gotta go through those days just to get to a day like this day was. And here we found ourselves in the rut ball. They were whistling and bugling. And that's the thing about those big glory tags is, if you wait that 20, 30 years, whatever, to draw the premier tag, and you don't have that elk hunting experience behind you, it's still elk hunting. I mean, even though those are better tags, the elk still don't like people. They still don't like vehicles. They don't like roads. Elk live in tough places. It can be hot. They may not be rutting. Elk hunting is tough. And that's why I really encourage people. And that's kind of the moral of this story is just go hunt. You've got to go learn about the elk. And so anyways, we get into this dark timber and we're getting closer. This bull's bugling. I know they're getting close to their bedding area, and we're slipping in. We're not making a sound. We're slipping in. And I'm feeling like, oh, we got this. Because if you can get in really, really tight on those elk and then whistle, sometimes you can get them to come. If you get in that bubble, if you get in their safe space and you let out a whistle or a cow call, all of a sudden it's like, who's in my bedroom? So that's what we're trying to do. And by this point, the thermals had flipped and they're starting to blow uphill. And kind of that late mid-morning and we're above them just barely, and we're almost more side hill, but just slightly above, which is just perfect for an uphill thermal. We're getting closer, and all of a sudden, a darn cow. We look through the trees, and there's a cow, and she's staring at us, and you instantly know you're done for. And we did the stare at each other thing for a while, and you kind of hope that they'll forget about you, but her and her last year's calf are just burning a hole through us, and we're caught. What can you say? And so finally they blow. Well, I mean, they don't really blow, but they go, and they take the herd with them, and they go through that finger and kind of over and into the next finger. And so we just kind of trail them, but there's several other bulls bugling. And we get into that next finger, and across the way, there's a bull bugling with a few cows. And again, dark timber. It's not like you're looking across very well. And it just sounds like to me they're getting ready to bed. They've slowed down. His bugles are getting kind of bellowier. They're getting lazy, like they're going to bed right there. And so we made a big loop. We climbed up several hundred feet, circled around the head end of that little finger canyon, and came in on top of them. Just perfect. And then we snuck right in there. I was feeling really good. I thought we were in a great spot. We were right on top of them. And I let out just a little wimpy bugle, and they're gone. So I don't know if they've been pressured or they caught us and we didn't know something. They didn't like it, and that just I thought that was the perfect spot, and they're gone. And so now we find ourselves. It's getting close to lunchtime. We are a long ways from the truck, and it's like stupid far. And I know that if we kill an elk now, we're gonna have to call in help to get it out. And so we just kind of plop down, take a nap, drink some water, eat some food. We're just kind of spread out on this hillside, just taking a siesta. And all of a sudden, this bull bugles, and it's like, oh snap, he's close. Like, where did he come from? A, but B, we got to go. And so, I mean, and it's yard sale. Like, our backpacks are open. We've got food all spread out. My release is off. My bow's over there. Like, we are yard sailed out. I scramble around. I find my release. I find my bow. We not really jog, but like quick hike, like 30 yards to kind of get in behind a pine tree and kind of try to find a lane and a spot. Cause I'm telling you, this bull was close. And in so doing, like about the time we got to that pine tree, he was standing there looking at us. There was a little meadow. He had us pegged. He whirled. We got a glimpse of him, but he's gone. And so now we're feeling kind of dejected, right? Like we've been in elk all morning. We've been busted basically 3 times. It's just like it's great because we're in elk and they're whistling, and we just can't seem to catch a break. We make the decision at that point, we can either backtrack and climb out of this canyon, drop down to the next one, climb out of that one, and then drop down to the pickup. Or we can make the long hike around and drop into this canyon we're looking at and actually getting further away from the truck, but then hike down the bottom and around, kind of how we would go in when we backpacked in. And we decided to take that path. And so we bailed off into the bottom of that canyon. We get in the bottom, and there's more elk bugling. And it's just, we were at this point, we were pretty whipped. We were pretty tired. And so honestly, we didn't give it a full effort. We probably gave it a good old C plus at best. But there was some elk bugling on the side, so we kind of go up on the side. Well, the sound of the creek and the canyon walls, and you get up on the south side and you realize that the bugles were actually coming from the north side, and then you drop into the creek and realize it's a steep scramble to get. And we kind of did that, working our way down a little bit, but again, just whipped, tired. And we finally kind of get out of the elk, and we kind of get down to a main fork right where we used to camp when I backpacked in there, 20 years ago when I was in college. And so we found our old camp, and there was actually some horseshoes that Jace had collected the year before when we went in on his hunt. And so we played this little makeshift horseshoe game and just kind of took a beat. And then from that point, I decided, instead of just taking the trail out and around, we scrambled got on the ridge, and I told Jace occasionally when we were hiking in those 20 years ago, we would bump elk on top of that ridge once in a while coming in. So we might as well go out that way and at least maybe have a chance. And I knew that scramble to the ridge, that quarter mile was going to be kind of sucky, and it was. It's steep and just kind of thick, and you kind of got to fight your way through it. But then once you break out on top, we've dropped some elevation now from when we were hunting them up the canyon, and we're kind of starting to get into some of that like ponderosa, little more open, little rocky kind of country. And so we bust out on the ridge, and there's kind of a little rock shelf. So we sit on those rocks, and we're drinking some water and catching our breath. And all of a sudden, I heard something, and I'm like, Jace, was that an elk? What was that? And he's like, no, I don't, it was weird. I don't know. And so we're having this conversation about what that was. And all of a sudden, that elk bugles again. And we look at each other like, oh, holy cow, there's a bull right here. And so we grab all of our stuff. Luckily we weren't all garage sailed out this time. And we don't hike very far, maybe 50 yards, and you can kind of see through this pretty open trees, and there's elk, and it's just like cow, 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 and we're both looking with our binos, cow, cow, and then a bull steps out, and I'm like, "Ooh, Jace, that's a nice little 6 point actually." And he steps out and whistles, and we watch him bugle. He's a couple hundred yards away. We're getting on evening time now. I don't know if we're, I don't know, 5:30, something like that. And so we wait until all the elk kind of go out of sight, and we jam down into those trees where we saw them and kind of peek around some trees. And there's like an open meadow, maybe 150, 200 yards. And then after the meadow, it kind of starts to roll off into some thicker timber. And the very second the last cow steps into that dark timber, we jammed down there, and we got right on the edge of that timber, and we could actually hear them walking, hear sticks. We knew we were close. And so I knocked an arrow and I let out a bugle, and that bull fired back just instant and mad. So we kind of got ready, and everything kind of paused for a couple of minutes, and we're waiting. And so I let out one more little bugle, using my tube to kind of direct it, make him think we're somewhere just a little bit different. And then we see antlers coming through the trees. And he stops about 40 yards away. And again, it's thick. And if he would come to our right, just a few steps, he'd kind of step into that edge of the meadow, and we'd have a pretty good shot. But at this point, I don't want to call, because now he's close enough. If we call, he's going to know right where we're at, and he's going to want to see something. So when those elk get that close, you don't want to call necessarily, because they're going to pin you. And that's why sometimes with the buddy system, if you can have somebody back behind you calling, it can work. But in this scenario here, Jason and we're side by side, and that bull's 40 yards away. And I'm like, I'm not drawn, but I'm ready. Well, of course, instead of going to the right, he starts going to my left, working through the edge of the timber. And so I had a window, about like a basketball size window in there, and I thought, if he steps into that window, we're going to be golden. And so right before he gets to the window, I draw back, and of course, just short of the window, I mean, just can see a little bit of that brown hair on his neck in my window. He stops, and I am like holding and holding, and he's close. We ended up ranging at 16 yards. Like he's close. And I'm holding and I'm holding, and I had a reed in my mouth. And the second he started to take a step, I was gonna cow call, but I didn't have to. He just took one step and then stopped in that window. And in that window, there was one little baby, like brand new aspen tree, like just barely twiggy, and it was really close to the elk, like maybe from me to the edge of that table, away from that bull. And I knew that my arrow would get through it, no problem. So I picked out a leaf in that little squiggy aspen that I thought was in the right spot, and boom, sent it. And it hit home, and it sounded good, and the elk busted off. And Jason and I are looking at each other. I'm pumping my fist and like, we just killed an elk. Holy cow, that just happened. Like we had given up. We literally had given up when we were hiking out, and we ran into this bull. And so we backed out, gave him probably a half hour, made a couple phone calls. We're excited. I wasn't 100% sure about the shot. I felt really good about it. The window was tight, but I knew it was in his chest. But I couldn't really see, because, the second I shot, he whirled, he was gone. I couldn't really like watch him running off. And so we kind of snuck in there to the scene of the crime and found the back half of my arrow. And it didn't look like it had the penetration that I thought it should. So I got a little worried. And we just went a few yards and I found some blood, found some spots. I thought I saw some bubbles in one of the specks. And I'm thinking, okay, I think we're okay. But I'm a little concerned. And so we just held up. We just waited and we probably gave it an hour. We waited till maybe 45 minutes before dark, 30 minutes before dark before we picked up the trail. And we started trailing him, and the blood was just getting better and better and better. We finally got into like this little boulder field. There's a couple boulders like, shoulder high, and the one boulder is just painted red. I mean, painted red. In fact, I probably can't even put the picture in this video because I bet it'll get flagged by the socials. And we came around the corner, and sure enough, there he is. And so we're high-fiving, and we took some pictures, and it was just this great experience. We ended up carrying 2 quarters out that night. It took us a couple hours to get him quartered up and hung up. By then it's pitch black, dark, no moon, super dark night. And I knew that getting off of there's a little old worn like sheep trail. And if you miss that trail, it sucks. And I knew finding that trail in the dark was going to be tough. And I hadn't been on that trail, since before Onyx, before any of these mapping things. So I didn't have a pin where that trail was. And sure enough, we couldn't find it. And I had called and texted with my cousin while we were waiting. And he had gone on Onyx and studied and made a circle and said, I think you can get down right here if you can't find the trail. And so we went to that circle and bailed off of there. And I mean, it sucked. Like, it's steep, shaly, thick. It was not fun. I was carrying a hindquarter, and Jace had got all of the neck meat, backstrap, inner loins. I mean, and that bag on an elk is a heavy bag. And we kind of skied through there, and when we hit the road, or we would hit the road, our truck was actually still parked a couple miles up because of the way that we ended up looping around. We actually came out a couple miles below our car. Well, in the meantime, my oldest son, who was a junior in high school, he's like, I'll drive up and pick you guys up. So he drove up, and we can see his car. Like, we're skiing down through the gnar. I can see, like, his car's right there. It's like, the freedom or the relief is right there. And anyways, we ski through, we get to his car, he takes us to our truck, and next day my father-in-law actually decided, he's like, I think we can get our horses in there. So we went back in the daylight the next morning and actually found that old sheep herder's trail. Now I have a mark in my Onyx, and we got the horses in there and packed them out, and it was just a great day. My wife came, and another elk in the freezer. But here's the thing, the throwaway nothing tag turned into be the best hunt of the year. When we killed a great bull, we had a great day, we had lots of bugling. And even though I have that quote unquote glory tag in my pocket, it was this other tag that provided, the great experience. And I think the lesson is time in the field, learning country, knowing where ridges are, knowing where timber is incredibly valuable, incredibly valuable. When you're going in blind, yeah, there might be more elk, but you don't know what's around the corner. You don't know where those elk like to go. And if you can learn an area by hunting it several years in a row, it can really help increase your success. And so, using the liminal mantra, you've got these liminal moments, use those spaces of time to go hunt. And if you can just really start learning an area, you're going to ultimately probably be more successful. And then when you do draw that glory tag, you're a better elk hunter too. But putting it off and saying, well, I'm going to wait until I draw that tag 20, 30 years from now, A, you're not teaching yourself about elk. B, you're losing opportunity to be in the woods. So take those liminal moments and go. Maybe you're successful, maybe you're not, but you're going to learn a bunch. And just because it's an over-the-counter or lower quality tag doesn't mean you can't have a great hunt. Now, you're going to have to work, obviously, as the story illustrates. I think my son's phone said we ended up doing just short of 12 miles that day, like 11.8. And I can't remember how many flights of stairs. It was a stupid amount of vertical. It was a rough day, but we wouldn't have killed that elk if we'd have turned around in that first canyon, when we were contemplating whether to chase him or not. We just kept going and kept going. And we're fortunate enough to have friends and family to help us get elk out. And actually, in this situation, it ended up kind of being pretty tough to get the horses in there. We were just going to backpack in there, the three of us, me and my two sons, and about an hour in, hour out, I thought we could jam in and out and get that elk out pretty quickly. And it probably would have been the better course of action. Ended up being actually kind of tough to get those horses in there through some of the scramble, but we got it done. It worked out, and it was a great day that I got to spend. Both boys came, and my father-in-law and my wife, and so we had a nice day in the fall aspens. But anyways, I hope if anything, this just motivates you. We're getting really close to the draw deadline here in Colorado. It just motivates you. Go do it. Like, you can't kill them from the couch. Go get after it, and you never know what's going to happen. You might kill a bigger bull on that general over-the-counter hunt than on that 20-point hunt. You just never know. So anyways, I hope you learned something. I hope it was a fun story, and we will catch you on the next one.